Dragon's Dogma 2 is back with a vengeance. The brand new DLC has been announced, and I'm so excited to talk about it. I wanted to make a video earlier this week, but of course, the trailer dropped at the start of my work week, and I had no time to make it. But my weekend is here, and I finally can. This video isn't going to be a trailer breakdown or anything like that. It's not too exciting. I just wanted to talk about what I've seen and what's potentially coming with this DLC. So mainly just my thoughts on the DLC. I'm not going to be editing this video all that much, so I'm just going to have gameplay in the background. Although, I'll show anything on screen if it needs context. So, let's get talking. Story. The story is what the trailer opens and ends with by the looks of it. At the beginning, you can see what I assume is our Arisen riding a griffin into the snowy mountains of the North region. Which is crazy how accurate the note was in the second anniversary artwork. To think we were just a few months away from learning about this DLC. It's really wild. Then, near the end of the trailer, we get another story shot. What appears to be a new dragon, and with it, a new Arisen. This character is what many are assuming is the new Dark Arisen, and the story will revolve around her in some way. Although this could also be a similar case of the first game where we are interacting with the Arisen's pawn. So this character might just be another pawn. However, if this character does end up being another Arisen, this brings up a potential plot hole concerning the Arisen cycle. How can there be two Arisen at the same time? Will this affect the cycle with the Seneschal? And does this imply that there are multiple Seneschal, or is this just an oversight? As the original Dark Arisen DLC had Daemon technically no longer being an Arisen, after transforming into Daemon. So this is something we'll have to wait and see really. There's no way to answer this until we get more information on who this female character is. Norgan culture. But moving on to something more or less unrelated to the story is the setting of this northern region. It seems to be inspired and based on Norse or Viking culture, as opposed to the European and African Middle Eastern styles of Vermont and Batal respectively. Although, and I'm very excited if this ends up being the case, being based on Norse culture could open the possibilities of sea travel, as that's what most people think of when thinking of Vikings. And no, I'm not delusional enough to think we will be controlling a ship like Assassin's Creed or Sea of Thieves. But maybe being able to ride on a boat with a set path or even using one as transport in lieu of ox carts. Especially if the story of Dark Arisen takes place after the events of the Unmoored World and the eradication of the Brine. Again, we will have to wait and see, but it would be a completely new experience. And that does it for my story theory and analysis. It's really not that deep, since, let's be honest, the story is and will probably always be secondary to the amazing gameplay. But it's fun to talk about nonetheless. Next, I wanted to talk about how much content we could potentially expect, as I have some interesting figures. So the original Dragon's Dogma game took about 3 years to produce from scratch, and its DLC came out the following year, meaning it had about a year of production. Meanwhile, DD2 took 5 years to produce, because apparently Itsuno was waiting for console hardware to be up to snuff for what he had planned, which explains the gap in development between the first game and this one. And if we were to believe that Capcom started development of Dark Arisen 2 immediately after the launch of DD2, which I think is safe to assume, but I'll get into that later, we are looking at half the time of the game's initial development for just the DLC, opposed to the third of the time for the first game. And what makes this even more promising is that you have to remember how game development works. The base game was created in 5 years from scratch, whereas the DLC is starting with a good foundation and established direction, meaning much more can be created and in less time. So I think we can confidently say that this DLC is going to be a chunky one, much more than Dark Arisen 1. Hopes for the DLC. Next, I wanted to talk about what I'm interested to see. So, if this DLC is going to be bigger, what sort of stuff can they bring to the table? Well, there are some confirmed things I want to go over, but I also want to talk about things I'm personally hoping for. 12 dungeons and replayability. First and biggest is the 12 brand new dungeons coming in the DLC. These are expected to be quite a bit more substantial than anything in the game by how they put it. Like, these are going to be full-on adventures in their own right. It would be really cool if these dungeons had challenges or some sort of modifier to make them more unique, because these sound like they are going to be replayable. which for the game would be a very much welcome addition. And this is my personal hope, but I really hope there is some sort of arena dungeon, like a Colosseum of some kind. One where you fight increasingly harder enemies until you face the final challenge. Now that's the kind of replayability stuff I like to see. I like seeing horde modes, lots of monsters, and lots of challenge. If it's hard, and I die a lot, that's the kind of stuff I like, and I hope there's something like that in the DLC. And getting back to what I mentioned earlier about Capcom starting development immediately, being almost confirmed, is that these dungeons are basically the proof, as the entrances to these dungeons are going to be the broken rift gates scattered around the map. And these have been there since the beginning of the game, meaning this DLC was planned. New terrain, new environment. Moving along, we are also getting a new type of environment, an icy tundra, something new to the series, which means we will most likely be getting even more variants than the ones we know about. And we might even get new environmental challenges, reminiscent of the high wind areas in the first game, but with an emphasis on cold as well. Think of something like maybe you get too chilly and you gotta camp out. Maybe the nights are cold. Potential new vocations. And as for vocations, I wouldn't count on them adding any new ones. It looks like they're adding some skills for pre-existing ones, and I honestly think that's enough. New pawn inclinations. Something that I personally would really love to see is an expansion to the pawn inclinations. The pawns are so lively with their different interactions, and adding even one to the mix would increase the amount of combinations by a handful, as well as add a new way a pawn will behave in battle. New dialogue. And on a similar note, I hope they add some new dialogue between characters. Even just some new idle dialogue for NPC characters would be enough for me. But I'm hoping specifically for pawns, because I love them. They're so fun. New soundtrack. And the last thing, which is basically a given, is a new soundtrack. There will 100% be a new soundtrack, and most likely a title card song update. We got some banger tracks in Dark Arisen, and I can't wait to see what Capcom makes this time. And so, that was basically everything I think is coming, plus my picks for what I would want. Now, to talk about my favorite aspect of the game. The monsters coming in this expansion. And potentially another group. Monsters. So, starting off, we are looking at a Norse-themed area. So I did some research and cooked up some ideas for potential monsters. As well as that, I looked at the monsters shown in the trailer. I'll start with the ones in the trailer, since we know those ones for sure. Frost Giant. Most prominently displayed in the trailer is what I assume is a frost giant. In Norse mythology, this is a race of monsters that Loki comes from. And you can see that these guys have a set of horns identical to that of Loki. So I'm confident that these are frost giants. And rather interestingly, frost giants are quite problematic to the Norse gods. So there's a low chance that we may see our first non-arisen god in the franchise. Although I wouldn't bet on it. That seems a little bit out of Dragon's Dogma's wheelhouse. Next, we see what many believe to be is the cockatrice, reimagined for Dragon's Dogma 2. Someone even pointed out that it looks like the concept art from the first game, and I really can't argue. It does look just like it. It seems to have been given the ability to breathe fire as well, which in myth, they're actually known to do. There's also a drake, but it's really not that interesting. It looks like it would just be a drake variant with ice theme. Same goes for the ice saurian and the wolves. I'm hoping there's a few more tundra variants to add here, especially the goblin. I'd love to see a woolly goblin, that would be so fucking funny. A little hairy goblin walking around. Yeah, the goblins are fun because they have a lot of variants and stuff, and I think that'd be my favorite for sure if they added that. However, the biggest and most story-driven monster added has to be the new dragon. It looks decrepit and ancient, and the fact that it summoned Draugr makes it seem even more ancient and mysterious. Could this be a dragon from a long-lost Arisen? Or even the reanimated corpse of the dragon being manipulated by the titular Dark Arisen? It leaves us with more questions than answers just by this short clip. But I'm sure we'll find out. Lastly, for monsters that we see in the trailer and what we can expect, I wanted to talk about the wargs and garms. These are actually Norse monsters, believe it or not, so we have a high chance of seeing these guys in greater numbers, and maybe even some variants of them. But let's move on to some speculation, because these are the fun ones. More elves and dwarves. Elves and dwarves were introduced to us with Dragon's Dogma 2, and I see a high chance of us getting these races expanded on in the DLC. Both elves and dwarves are also of Norse origin, so settlements of these races are not out of the question, especially for dwarves, as we didn't have any dwarven villages or towns, but we did get the Sacred Arbor. And now that I think of it, a new dwarven settlement might be where we get the new gear enhancement. Since there has to be a new style, this would fit pretty well in the way you obtain it. Now let's get back to monsters. Fenrir. Now for a real monster. The Fenrir. Also of Norse origin. This is a massive wolf monster, and son of Loki apparently. Maybe Loki is going to make an appearance, but Fenrirs are pretty basic. They are just very large and extremely strong. So they would make for a great monster akin to the Chimera, albeit with no magical powers. I'm not going to say this. They're pretty much a Kelpie. This is a weird one, but the Kelpie is a water horse. These aquatic horses will lure their prey to the water's edge and then pull them in and under. This would make for a good mid-sized monster, although it seems a little too niche. Dragon's Dogma likes to have their mid-sized monsters hunt in groups as well, and that doesn't fit for a Kelpie at all. So I don't think the Kelpie would find its way into Dragon's Dogma literally just for that fact alone. Trolls. And lastly, for the monsters, we have a really cool one that I honestly hope gets added. The Troll. This could be a unique nighttime monster, as that's when they're mainly active. These would be like ogres in Dragon's Dogma, but with a unique mechanic. They turn to stone once day breaks. And they could even catch you off guard by transforming from rock to troll right next to you once the sun sets. It just sounds like this fits right in with Dragon's Dogma's day and night cycle. And like the others, it's also of Nordic origin, making it fit thematically as well. And that's really all I have to talk about. I know I will personally be buying this DLC on day one and playing the hell out of it. But I hope for all Dragon's Dogma fans' sake that it performs well, gets rated well, and most importantly, it sells well. And this isn't even all of the exciting news about the game. The recent update and the update coming in August are also sounding really good. It just feels like a good time to be a Dragon's Dogma fan. And even though I haven't played the game in a little while, this is making me so excited because it's honestly a one-of-a-kind RPG. The dark fantasy elements and everything else it has to offer, you just can't find something like this anywhere. So seeing that the DLC is announced, it really fills my... It sounds so corny. It really fills my heart with joy. Anyways, I'd love to further discuss this in the comments. So if you have anything you want to talk about the DLC, and feel free to put it in the comments below. And until next time,
Bye-bye.